Action? Is that it?
Action. Looks alright still. So, if you want to say your name,
Okay.
say,
Name.
shit.
You break it? Did I break it?
Make sure it's all
Well,
Yeah.
I hope you give you some good material here. My name, Nicholas Curry, born and raised in Astoria, Queens, even though we're in sunny Springfield, New Jersey now. So that's it.
How long
And
have
then-
you lived in? How'd you get started? How about that?
oh my God, I come from a storied family of weightlifters. I grew up in the sport. I mean, I was a baby in a carriage going in weightlifting competitions back when there was, maybe 1,000 registered athletes probably in then. I started going to competitions in the 1960s. I have memories of being at McBurney Y when I was like 8 years old, playing around with a bar, doing technique, then running down the stairs and jumping in the pool, and then running around the gym and just all over the place. Like my father would be working out. Saturday workouts were big. That was the spot. My father was a big McBurney Y weightlifter. Then they had other people at Lost Battalion Hall. Lost Battalion Hall is still going. It outlasted, McBurney got closed down, I guess in the 80s. They said they were redoing the floor or something, the Olympic weightlifting room. And then they basically threw everyone. Then once they got everybody out, they put all Nautilus equipment in. And a different crowd came in, the YMCA crowd, because, that was down in Soho. And trying to be correct. So then, I started there. My first competition was, I was, I guess, 13, 1974. 1975, I have it written down. And it was a open meet in New York, I think. And that was it. I competed from probably 74 to 76, and then I retired, my first retirement. I had enough. I was a teenage kid. My father was like a very aggressive coach. And then I came back later. But getting back, my father's growing up, my father was like a gymnast, and he did a lot of hand balance stuff, and his best friend growing up was Dave Shepard. And I guess they started weightlifting together, and what was the guy's name? David, I thought of him the other day. I could see his face. He used to stop by my house. He had a garage in Astoria, because they lived by Broadway in Astoria, Queens. And they were walking past this, I have to remember his name. This is the guy who started Dave, too, I believe. They walked past his garage, and he's like, hey, guys, you want to, try this out? And he taught him how to lift. And then Dave became, basically set world's records, some that he didn't get recognized for. I'm not sure the story how many he got. He was one of America's greatest lifters and did get a lot of recognition for a lot of stuff he did. But that was my father's best friend. So my father started lifting, I guess he was in his 20s already. He had a family. He had 2 kids by that time. I came along late. I was born in 61. I guess this is 50s. So then he was always weightlifting. Getting back to how I grew up going to competitions. My brother Butch was a great teenager. My brother Butch, James Curry Jr. Well, he was not really a junior. It's just James Curry. And then my mother didn't want to be called Junior, I guess. And then he got the nickname Butch, and he's definitely a Butch. It definitely fits, So he started lifting young, really young, and he was like a teenage national champion. I know there's a great picture of Butch that he has. He's trying to rack a double bodyweight clean when he was turning 16. And Dave Shepard standing in the background, like leaning back, watching. And I think he tried it, I don't know. Butch probably tell the story better. He'll remember he was there like 15 times. And he racked it. He just couldn't get it. He really wanted a double bodyweight clean when he was 15. He did really great back then. And then he slacked off. And then he started getting very serious again when he moved out to California years later. So he was a teenage champion, and coming up, he went to, I know he was, he won, I don't know if he won the Teenage Nationals. I don't think he won the Teenage Nationals, which I guess is our juniors now. It was they didn't have juniors. Juniors was something different back in the 70s and before. So he went to his junior camp and got serious and hung out. I guess that was the 70s. But so I started lifting. Like I said, I grew up around it all the time. My father, we used to work out in Astoria. We lived in an apartment building, and we used to train in the basement. But it had very low ceilings, and it had these steel beams to keep the building from sinking because it had shifted. It was built on a swamp back in the 20s, I guess it was. In the 20s, my grandfather bought it right around then. And so we used to lift in the basement. Then my father, since there was not enough room to go overhead, we dug the pit, so it was called the pit. And then as I got older, I was in my early teens, we used to train down in the basement. I'd lift there. So I used to, when I was young, we used to watch my father work out. Me and my friends, we used to peek in the alley. He'd be working out. Hey, Jim, what are you lifting? And he'd be breaking his ass down in our basement. you'd go to McBurney's some nights, train down there. And then I used to go down there and, throw some weights around. I had my first workouts. I have my book upstairs. I would say I was probably 11 years old when I had my first official workouts and started training. So.
And your first competition was at 13?
Yeah, I think it was 13. I don't think you were allowed to compete. They shut you down before that. I mean, even like I know Danica, she wasn't allowed to compete when she started training. I think Rudy made her wait until 12 at that point. I think, it was 13. A friend of mine who I was hanging, he didn't go to the same schools as me, but we were very close. Our mothers were close when we when we were really small. They hung out in this playground together when we were kids running around. And he decided he got a weight set for Christmas, one of those plastic things. So I started going up there and we started working out, and I knew how to do the lifts. I guess I showed him, and he wanted to become a lifter. So we started training together. My father coached us. This is Jeff Dunay. So then after a while, he faded away, and he was very talented. I think he won the National Junior Olympics when he 75. I took fifth or something, but that was 75 Junior Olympics I lifted, so I had been lifting. And then he quit after that, and I hung out one more year lifting, 70, and then we both basically quit in 76. It was doing other teenage shit, hanging out. I had a girlfriend, so I stopped competing. But every few years, I would, every few months, I would get the ball, go work out for a while. The only thing I knew how to do, I didn't like, doing bodybuilding. I was a weightlifter. But that whole time that I didn't compete from the Junior Olympics, where I guess in the summer, probably like July 76, to Big Apple Open in October 1987. So I took 11 years off from competing. But I came back, and I had left as a 67.5 athlete. I came back, I was 100 kilos. And I lost weight to make 100 kilos. And I actually beat my best from before. And a guy I used to train with who was one of the top national lifters in the Mario Lazaro, who was around when I was a kid. He still lifted that whole time. He thought it was the greatest thing because you broke your old records. I said, Mario, though, I'm like, you're 50 kilos heavier now. What the, still doesn't matter. I said, all right. But I was really weak as a kid, man. I look back then, I had no muscle anywhere. I'd spent a lot of years like high school hanging out with the boys and doing, stuff, misspent youth, I guess. But I look back at the results from like the Junior Olympics I was in 76. It was like Mario Lazaro. That's Mario. Mario Martinez won as a 90 kilo. They're like 125, 150 something, or whatever, 160 or more. And then other people, Arndt Tritsky, who was an Olympic weightlifter. He was an Olympian. He was an 84 Olympian. Then he was a national champion in 82.5. His brother was Thor Tritsky, who was this friggin' one of the biggest guys I saw at one time. We were at the trials in 88, and he was walking. Thor was a big power lifter. And he won my class the year I bombed in my last Junior Olympics when I retired at that point. And that was 7. So I know he won. But a lot of guys who competed at that level were gone by the 80s. I mean, a lot of them had great careers. And like in the early 80s, they were right up there trying the Olympic trials and that dream. But I took the time off, and I got lucky. I got a whole second career. I came back to the sport after 11 years. If they're really not being away, I just didn't compete. And then I competed for the next 20 years from like 87 to 2007. So my body was basically, that was enough. And I trained, and I just got more and more into the coaching aspect, obviously. It was like and that's what I do now. That's my, I miss doing the lifts, but physically I can't, it's unfortunate.
Did you follow the sport when you retired?
Yeah, absolutely. I was at meets every year. We'd go to nationals. I was at the World's Championships in 78, the Worlds were in Gettysburg. I was there the whole time. I filmed it. I'd go to nationals. I went to a lot of the nationals, especially when my brother Butch, he became national champion in 79. I wasn't there that year. He won actually in Jersey at the ice ring up in, I forget the town again. I'm bad with names. Close to where we were, Pinebrook. Anyway, so he, I watched him at the national. Went to Chicago to see him win the junior nationals in like 78. So I went to all the meets. I still went to the meets. My brother-in-law Artie was a big national contender, and then he became an official and book writer and very involved. My whole family was very involved. My father was a meet director, ran the Big Apple Open at LBH for years. He used to give away like the hugest trophy you could get for the outstanding lifter and give him cash, which was big. I mean, $50 for a lifter then was like a lot, And then gave away apples to all the athletes. Got a lot of gimmicks. And we always ran it upstairs at LBH. At that point, a lot of the meets were downstairs. Just the bigger meets were held upstairs. But he always made sure he had the upstairs gym and really made it a classy meet and really did a lot. So I was still involved. I just, I would train in my basement. I know in 85, I started training really, really hard again. Like For like 3 months, I was training really well in my basement, and we had a power rack down there, and it was sketchy cement, and I eventually knocked it over a bit, and I got tired of doing complexes, like clean front squats for reps, and then a jerk or whatever, and then I laid off that again. But then in '87, I went on a vacation with Butch, my brother, and then I stayed in Berkeley, and I had nothing else to do, so I joined the Berkeley Y. They had 2 platforms. In fact, my friend Dave Stein just showed me a picture of how it is now. It's all redone with platforms and bumpers everywhere, and it looks beautiful. I had, the metal plates, the old fat York plates, and a couple of York bars, and there was one of those old Russian bars locked up that belonged to, I think, a guy named Fred, and this is in Berkeley, California. So that was the summer of '87. I started training again. And the only way I knew how to train, like I said before, I wasn't much into curls, and I knew how to lift. So I started lifting, and I was the only one down there, and then I started training, and then I really got into it. I stayed out in California from May on to December, and then I had to move back to New York. But and then I competed again in October, then we went back to California. But by then I was training at the Sports Palace a little bit. I trained with Steve Goff in Fairfax weightlifters like Tommy Goff when he was a baby, Yasha Faye when he was a baby, and Butch was big with that crew with Steve Goff, who was running his program. So we used to go up there. It was a little bit of a drive just over the bridge, but drive everywhere. So I'd go in some days to the Sports Palace, and I was training there when the heydays of the Sports Palace, like 1987. Mario, the year before the Olympics, and Mario was lifting huge weights, and he had a great Olympics, and he was regularly snatching over 180 kilos and throwing around big jerks, and so it was a very memorable period. So that got you enthused, but I still lift in very small weights. So that's me.
Who were the lifters leading up to 1980 that you remember? Who were the big names?
In American weightlifting or world?
In American, to start with.
All right, American. Besides my brother? I mean, I guess there was a transition. I was around in the early 70s, mid 70s going to York. So I know Grapaldi, he waned off. He tore tricep in 79. So Butch beat him at the 79 Nationals. I wasn't there again. I was on my senior trip from high school, and Butch won. I was like, what? What do you mean he won? But that's what used to happen. I mean, you won the Junior Nationals, which were not for 20 and under. It was for if you never won the Senior Nationals, or if you never won the Junior National, or you never won a world title, because there was Americans that great, I guess, at a time that you'd be world champion and never won the Nationals. So, excuse me. So, like I said, back in 74, 76, it was Lee James. I knew, I was very involved with going on the Olympics, and that's an important point too about the Olympics in my family. But I'll get back. Like Lee James was a great name. Guy Carlton was a little right around that time, I guess. Bob Giordano, I knew forever. I mean, we knew since I guess the early 70s. And then, Mark Cameron, I knew very well. We used to travel together, and he was from Central Falls, Rhode Island. But we used to go up to, I used to compete in Central Falls. It was nothing for us to go to meets all over, the Northeast. The Region 1 was, I guess, all the way up to Massachusetts, down to, I guess, Philly. Or maybe Philly was actually the Mid-Atlantic region. But we'd go to, like the Philly Open, which was basically a national championship, so it was a sick meet. I mean, back when they had the press, there's legendary stories about, Bednarski, taking his last jerk at like 3 in the morning. And he used to go on, I used to go to sleep in the bleachers and wake up and it's time to go, be, all night long. But even like 74, 76, I mean, I'm just going back a little further than 80. So leaving the 80, I mean, Cameron was still around, Grapaldi was still around. He was at the end. Lee James, I think, was done by then. I think his knees were bad. Donnie Abrahamson was a kid who I was actually I went to after the Junior Olympics, I went to a training camp for junior athletes. It was up in Connecticut we were. It was Frank Gatecarts was the name back then who ran, I guess, not the Plainfield, Willimantic Y he was involved with. So that's where the Nationals were. He was probably to meet that big guy, Frank. He passed away, casualty of, of being big guy. And he was coaching, but he ran his training camp. So I was there with like this guy, Donnie Abrahamson, became a national champion. Wound up lifted for Schmitz. So he was national champion like a 67.5. But I was in the camp when we were kids. We were 15, and he was just a smart aleck kid from Florida. No, he was a good guy from, let me stop, but from Florida. Cal Shake was around. I'm trying to remember who was around like in 80. Cal Shake probably made the Olympic team. Mike Cartwright was still hanging in there. Who I grew up loving. This guy had this beautiful technique. He won so many nationals. He was always like, Last one to snatch. You know, everyone's pretty much done. He had this beautiful upright position and his huge thighs. He used to use a frog style. It was just like so cool. And he lifted in Puma sneakers that had a wedge on them. So it was pretty amazing. Karchit, Cameron, a guy Sederberg, who was he's still I still see him when we go out to the Arnolds. He's still around. His brother helps run it, Roy Sederberg. And that's a funny story. Roy Sederberg always says, when we talk, he's always happy to see me, and we talk, and then he's like, if you're staying, he goes, David, you know what me and Nick have in common? We both have brothers who are Olympians. So that's his big, that's our claim to fame, that we both have brothers who are Olympians, because his brother made the team, and so did Butch, obviously my brother. And then 1980, yeah, they were 1980. Actually, and then before that, like you asked, going to beach, we went in '79. Butch made the Pan Am Games, the Pan Am team from America. So the whole family packed in. He had a girlfriend and a wife at the time, Marianne. Packed in with the family. We, flew to Miami and went to Puerto Rico. It was the hottest weather I had ever felt, man. It was like 8 in the morning, 10 in the morning on the beach. They're like, all right, just stay, watch the stuff, and they're going back to the hotel for a minute. I was like passing out from the, so it was hot. And the competition was probably indoors, outdoor. I think Butch medaled in the snatch and bombed in the jerk. I think there was weight loss issues and all. And these were the guys who were like going to wind up in the Olympic team. Butch, he medaled, like I said, he medaled in the snatch at the Pan Am Games. I'm pretty sure, and bombed in the jerk. He would have placed top 3, I believe. At that point, there was a bunch of Cubans and the rest of the usual Pan Am, usual suspects. And Butch was a 90-kilo lifter. Cameron was there. I think Guy Sederberg. I think actually that's a Guy Carlton and Roy Sederberg. Roy is the brother. And Kurt Sederberg, sorry. Kurt Sederberg is the Olympian, like my brother. Guy Carlton is 110 kilo. He's a diesel guy. He hung on him. I think he made the 80 team, and then he also made the 1984 team, where he medaled. I think he got a bronze, and he fought for silver. That's later on. So the Pan Am Games was really, I went down and watched. It was great competition. Went to a lot, hung out in Puerto Rico, and Butch was there. Butch medal. I forget who was the other 90 kilo at that point. Cameron I always knew, like I said. I knew Cameron when he was a skinny kid, like 74 in New York, and you're talking 5 years later. He went from 82.5, I knew when he first was coming up nationally, and he was a teenager. And Joe Mills I knew my whole life from Bednarski, who was, I think, the greatest American lifter ever, and one of the greatest ever. And now Joe Mills was his coach out of his little town of Central Falls, Rhode Island. He was also Mark Cameron's coach, and Mark Cameron was a great lifter. You could just ask him, he'll tell you. Nah, Mark. Anyway, he was really great. He really had a strong mind, and he lifted, he grew up through the class. I saw him, from an 82.5, become a 90, and, fight Grapaldi. He was a very slim guy. Grapaldi was the most muscular guy you've ever seen. Huge, just ripped up a body and biceps and legs and strong. It's just that he used his arms. He was very strong, so he pulled like a guy who's very strong. And then, unfortunately, he could have done a lot more with better technique. I heard they wanted to send him to Russia. He wanted to go, but the USA, people like Hoffman and Sablo and Weissbrot, they were like, no, you're not going. Turpak, they put the kibosh on him going to Russia and training. And the Russians just wanted to help him. I think they wanted his bodybuilding secrets, from what I heard. So, again, I keep repeating the same names. Super heavyweights, I think Tom Stock was around. He made the team. And Jerry Hannon was a close friend. My brother-in-law already coached him. He coached him at the 78 Worlds, and then he was his coach. He I guess he went to Nebraska, I think, Jerry, and he was a thrower, but he's just an incredibly strong weightlifter. And he became a resident athlete, made the 80 team, and then he made that team too, and unfortunately, we know what happens. So Jerry was there. Like I said, another close personal friend on the team, Butchie, Giordano. Phil Sanderson was our 60-kilo champion at the time. I remember him well. He was always trying to set records, a little guy. To me, there's pictures when they went to China when they didn't compete in 80. Butch, Tom Stock, and Phil Sanderson. They all got the same much. To me, it's like they look like 3 of the same guy. It was just small Phil. Butch was medium, then Tom Stock was the big guy. He's a big, strong, super heavyweight. Him and Han. He beat Jerry at the Nationals, I believe, at that time, but they were both doing close. And then Jerry needed a 505, probably a 227.5 clean to take out Stock at the Nationals the one year. And he pulled it high enough to clean and just dumped it. Unfortunately, he didn't go after it that time. I don't know. I think he probably eventually did in practice. I don't know. And then and then let me think. Who was the 75 kilo guys back then? Regal was a guy who was around, a York guy, but he wasn't really lifting the big weights. Shake was around a little later in the 80s who snatched double body weight. He was a great American champ. I think he started at 67.5, moved up to 75, snatched. So he had the American record forever at 152.5, I know. So I believe he might have been on the 80 team also. And then the most amazing guy from like that period, 80, oh my God, I see his face. Oh, damn it. It's got to come to me. Joe Paleo. He lifted, he came out of retirement after being, I think he was a 68 Olympian, if not also a 72 Olympian. I think he was retired by 76. He became a lawyer, or he had been a lawyer, and he came out of retirement to make the 80 team. And Butch won the Nationals, but I think Paleo gave him a lot of trouble, and Butch wound up beating him, and they both made the Olympic team. But Paleo, I don't think he was. Butch had him a few years. You think Butch was a bit younger than him at the time.
Oh! Look at this. Merry
Oh,
Christmas, my friend.
thank you, brother.
What's going on?
Woohoo!
Oh, did you skinny? I know, right?
Oh my God! Don't hit me. I got a mic. I'm mic for sound here. Sorry. What's up? Yeah. It's all right. You can edit it.
I'm sorry, brother.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Hey, about it?
I was telling you.
Hey, don't worry.
Yeah. You want to pause? You're good.
What do you want to do?
No, it's up to you. You want to. So what you saying? Lifters that who I was remembering back then. Paleo was the big surprise. Like I was even talked to a good friend of mine from Queens who was a huge weightlifter. He still goes to all the worlds. Mark Velez. And he was like, Paleo. People like now, he says, don't know who Paleo is. Like he mentioned it to some, like even Frankie Murray, somebody training now, national contender. But I was just telling David about this great American champion. Joe Paleo came out and made the 1980 Olympic team. And Paleo was like a 68 Olympian. He was around in the, heyday, at the end of like the big period of American weightlifting when we were lifting world's records. Back then, there was almost like a second nationals was the Y Nationals. Because every YMCA back in the day had platforms and people lifted. McBurney Y in New York, the Duncan Y in Chicago was like Russ Nip was there. He was another guy who was finishing up. He wasn't around the 80. Once the press went, Russ Nip was a world record press holder. He had this awkward little grip, arm lock, but he could press the world's record, push press the world's record, snatch like with his twisted elbows and clean and jerk well. And he might have medaled at the worlds in the late 60s and went, but like I said, when he got rid of the press, he sort of went. Rick Holbrook wasn't around in the 1980s, early 70s. He was like the most beautiful, tremendous lift and such a great talent. And then leave it at that. But he was like his big, I remember the 71 Nationals. My father had beautiful pictures. This guy set American snatch record. I think he did 155, 341 it was. And just beautiful pictures of him. And he was just so far ahead. And then Peter Rawlick was still hanging in there. I think Peter Rawlick was a New York guy. Tremendous guy. Joel Jasinowski started him, I believe. He was a young kid, grew up in lifted at McBurney Y. And true story, like I heard it from more than one person that Rawlick, when you'd see him walking around, he wouldn't be training for a few, he'd disappear. He'd go out to the West Coast, disappear, come back skinny, right? Not even 75 kilos. They're like, Pete, what's going on? He goes, he start training, could barely, snatch 100 kilos, let's say. He goes, I'll try the American record in 3 months or 2. At the Philly Open, I'm going to snatch the American record. Damn right, he does 142.5, 142, whatever, snatched the American record. They were like, you could never believe how this guy could be so weak as a kid and out of shape, and he would just come back, and he had ass to the floor, knees all the way forward, deep squat position. And I know he lifted in 75 Nationals. He got hurt, and then he came back. I think he lifted in 79, but that was sort of the end. But he was like a big name when I was growing up. Rawlick, of course, we were close to Joel Jasinowski, a New York weightlifter. He lifted at the National too. He had a big press. Once they did away with the press, a lot of old timers, they sort of disappeared because that was the lift that got a lot of people in. And then, so there was a lot of names.
You're here to train, right? I don't want to...
No.
I'm not here to train. I'm here to visit.
You're here just to visit? You just got these pants on?
Well, I was going to go for a run.
Oh,
Run.
okay.
I
He's a
have
runner.
weights.
We want to move the ball count a little bit out of the frame.
Sorry.
You don't mind if we...
Oh.
I'll try to wrap up in a little bit, but I don't want to waste your time.
No, I'm actually incredibly happy to see you here. I didn't know you were here. Little surprise for me. You're home for Christmas,
Oh.
obviously.
Home for Christmas, yeah.
So
And,
Should have seen him yesterday. He was throwing around some weights.
Yeah, you strong?
No.
No, he's still moving well. He snatched what, 102 yesterday? Like, nice, yeah.
I haven't lifted a weight since April.
That's what I was talking to Lou. I was asking about you, and he said,
Yeah.
you're busy. And
I want to get in there and close the gym. I was gonna actually
You can still go. They're not going to stop you.
Yeah.
You're just going later.
Come in here and train.
Yeah, you're always welcome.
So,
You're always welcome. So,
So go on. I don't want to interrupt. You guys keep hitting, and I'll just hang out for a few minutes.
I know a few names. You see, once you get me started, it starts clicking. So Jerry, you know, I'm trying to go through who was around, who were like the champ. That might be the broken one. There's another one there, but you're pretty slim. Watch, you're off the tape. You're off the. Thank you.
Mine is broken. There we go.
Oh.
It is broken. Look at that.
Yeah, it's all right. It's fine. They won't go to front. Yes.
So, you want to talk about 1980, what you remember?
1980. What do I? Let me go back a little further than 1980. In my household, every 4 years, the most exciting thing that would come was the Olympics. We were an Olympic family. Never, still to this day, when people say, "What's your favorite sport?" I don't know if I messed you up. What's your favorite sport? I'm like, you know, they're like, "Oh, you watch?" No, what do you mean? You know, who's your favorite football team? I said, "Oh. Is it in the Olympics?" I don't watch it. I really, you know, I watch a little football. It's not. I'm not an American pro sports fan. You know, I'm amazed by the athletes. They're great athletes. It all goes on. I listen to sports talk when I'm. But my family, I grew up in an Olympic family from being involved with weightlifting. And I remember Butchie since I was a little kid talk about the Olympics. And there's a great picture of my father's stage where it's 1964 Olympics. So I'm 3 years old. And my whole family's posing in the living room with my grandparents in front of the TV, and the Olympics are on. My father was a professional photographer. He set up a camera time release, and we're all in the picture. We're all sitting there watching. So staged, but it's classic because Yaya, Papu, my grandmother, grandfather, from Butchie, my sister, my mother, father, were all sitting there watching the Olympics, and that's how it was. I also remember like 76, I guess I'm 15, or 72 Olympics must have been. Hanging out with I grew up in an apartment building in Astoria, everybody, close family, let's say. My friend's family owned the bakery, and my friend used to go to work to make the breadcrumbs. To me, it was fun making breadcrumbs. You got this big machine that milled it up. So Butch's like, "Where you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to hang out with, Vinny at the bakery." And, I'm hanging out with him. He goes, "The Olympics are on. Where you going?" He's like, "What's wrong with you? Where you going?" I'm like, I'll see you later, whatever. But growing up, like I said, and I've always been this way, from being involved with Olympic weightlifting. Well, weightlifting. I try to not always call it Olympic, but being involved with the sport of weightlifting and the Olympics, man. I'll sit down when the Olympics are on it's every 2 years now, but Winter Olympics, yeah, I watch, but I'm a Summer Olympics person. And weightlifting's huge for me, but I love the gymnastics. I'll watch the swimming. I'll watch, love track and field, all the sports. I'm just amazed by the athletes, and the Olympics is it for me. If it's an Olympic sport, I still tease people like, whatever fair training is now. I'm like, is it in the Olympics? No, it's never going to be in the Olympics, powerlifters, whatever. Nothing against it. I couldn't do powerlifting. I couldn't do CrossFit. I couldn't do bodybuilding. Weightlifting is what I grew up doing from a young kid, and now I coach it. And I'm a better coach than I was a weightlifter. That goes without saying. I've had great coaches who taught me, and I'm also very smart. No, I have a great eye. That's the one thing I have, that I see stuff that people don't see, that people even with video they don't see. But I think I see a lot, and it's simple to me. So the 1980 Olympics, it all goes back. Butch, my brother Butch is the 1980 Olympian, and very proud. So proud of him to make the team. And everybody on the team. I know what the dedicated, Butchie's whole life was geared to make an Olympic team. Okay? He'll say if he had changed his training in certain ways, he would have made 2 Olympic teams. He would have made the 76 team also. He would have been, in 76 he was 53. He would have been a bit younger. Well, he would have been 23, right. And then I guess in 80 he was 27, time in Olympics. He's born in 53. He was, like I said earlier, he was a teenage national champion. And then in high school, he was 15, 16, 17, really up and coming, competing at the junior nationals. I mean, the junior nationals, as I mentioned, was a B nationals. If you won the nationals, you couldn't compete in the junior nationals. It had nothing to do with age. It's what today's Americans is, but Americans, you could win 20 times. Back then, you won the juniors once, you expected to move on and become senior national champion. And Butch was one of those guys who did that, and tons of guys did it. You showed up at the juniors, and you moved on. And Butch won in Chicago, I think it was 78. We went out in the winter for the junior national, became junior national champion. But that was, he lived on the East Coast, was doing great. Went to Queens College, graduated after a little extended stay at Queens College. And he got to be a good 82.5 lifter, 82.5 light heavyweight. He qualified for the nationals, total like 275. And that was probably, I know he lifted at 75 nationals. 74 he didn't lift. He went out to California, lifted at 75, hurt himself with a 165 clean. hit his wrist, so little fracture. Shared the ambulance with Peter Rawlik, who I mentioned before, who blew out his knee at the 75. That they were run by. It was great. It was great pictures from that because it was run by Maverick, Bob Heiss, and they had some of the first bumpers. These fat ass like Maverick bumpers. They were also like 4 bumpers to the end of the bars. Just classic shots from back then. And remember like Cameron. It was the usual suspects. So Butch went out there his first nationals. 77, I think, was in San Francisco. 78 was San Francisco. He was competing, but in that period, I think 77, right, because he moved out to California in 1977 after graduating, got married to Miriam Pace, his girlfriend from high school, now Marion Clark, but another story, like Clark. So I'll try to stay on point. So he was up and coming, right? He moved to California. He met Jim Schmitz, I guess, at the National, started talking to him. He wanted to go to the Sports Palace, train with Jim Schmitz. And, I guess Jim was building his national team at that point, and Butch was one of the top guys. He already had Mario Martinez lifting for him. Ken Clark was a guy who Jim started and brought through the ranks. These guys, Ken grew up in San Francisco, who was also one of the top lifters. And Rich Shanko, going back to who was around that time. Rich Shanko and Ken Clark, as 100-kilo lifters, had great battles. Even bigger later on. These guys were lifting really big weights before the Clarks started. And so I don't think he didn't make the 80 team. He made the 84 team, I believe, Ken. And then Shanko was a little later on. He was a Jersey guy. They had great battles, but that more in the early 80s. So Butch went out to San Francisco. And let me tell you something about me and my family. My mother went to every meet. I was there every year supporting Butch. And we had, my brother-in-law, Artie Drexler, would lift. He bombed out at a lot of nationals. He placed second one year at the 73, but other than that, he used to bomb out a lot. And it was like you're sitting, you're so much pain watching someone who you love out there do a lift, and then it's like he's got it, and the tornado hits, and it would just keep going or something. So with Butchie, his whole career was hit and miss, like lifting-wise. Before San Francisco, he was good technically and strong, but it was always, opening up, you'd be like, sitting at the edge of the chair waiting, do it very good. He'd make it, you're like, all good. I remember times Butchie would bomb out meets going back, this is classic, and then Butch would miss his snatches, bomb out, and he goes in the back, and my father said, what are you doing? And it's like 115. He goes, I can snatch it anyway. My father said, that's right, you'll snatch it anyway. Meaning, fuck technique, and just anyway you can hold on and do something twisted, 18 attempts later, but it's like, see, I told you I could do it anyway. And my father's like, didn't help him. When he went out to San Francisco, one of the main things that Schmitz taught him to be consistent, was how to snatch 60 kilos properly. The whole thing in New York, one of the reasons why other people bombed out at a lot of nationals, was that I remember the philosophy growing up is you did power snatch or power clean till the weight drove you down. No one ever did the squat lifts back then. Maybe it was left over from the press, that they used to power clean for the press, but this was a thing. This one certain brother of mine's theory about why his brother-in-law, he bombed out from a lot of nationals, because he never warmed up his bottom position. He would come out, warm up, power. He has to go down. You're looking for the bottom, and it's all over. So, but Artie was up there, said Junior World's Records, but he was, by 80, he was done. I think his time was before that for the Olympics was. So again, with Butch, he went to San Francisco, and there was the first time we saw him lift at a national meet after that was the 78 Junior Nationals in Chicago, which he won. And he comes out and he smoked his opener at like 137 or 135, maybe 130, right around 300-pound snatch. And he did it. We were like, who is this guy, And I swear, I don't think I saw him miss an opener for, I don't remember how long after that. But this is something that Schmitz taught him how to do. He was big on, he didn't have what we say now, snatch 60, like you're going to do 160 and 160 like 60. But he taught him how to squat snatch from the beginning and warming up. There's days you do power snatch, there's days you do squat snatch, there's days you put them together. But you always, especially in the meet, you have to warm up the bottom position. So Butch became a much more consistent lifting. And then training with some of the best in the country, his lifts came up and up and up. So he won the 78 Junior Nationals. I don't remember what happened. I think the 78 Nationals were in California. I don't remember that. But I can go if I did. And then 79, he won. Like I said, I was away with my high school on my senior trip. I was, 18, 79. Butch won the Nationals over here in, I can't remember the name. It's right up the road off of 80 on, I always see the name. But there was an ice skating ring. It's a Home Depot now, I heard. But Butch had his big day, and he took out Lou Mercado, who's Lou Mercado is a very well-known Jersey lifter. I knew him. He lifted for Woodbridge Recreation back in the day when they used to come in the early 70s. I competed against. They had a whole group of kids. Butch Toth, who was, I believe, Rapaldi's coach, or the guy who might have started him. And Lou Mercado's Rapaldi's cousin. He was like Butchie's nemesis. They were both, like, he beat him at the Junior Nationals. Then he beat him at the Nationals. And it was close. I mean, Butch got his last jerk in, and I think Louis got turned down on his third attempt, which would have beat Butch. So they were close. They both did. Butch was a little more consistent in the snatch, I believe. Butch did that first Nationals. Then he won to like 142. And then what did he jerk? 182, I believe. So that was a big total for him. It was good. And he beat Lou by a few kilos. 79, I mentioned before, he went to the Pan Am Games. He bombed out. Lou went there. He bombed out. There was a lot of bomb outs and injuries, but it was fun. I mean, seeing the Cubans lift up close and like 1,000-degree weather. I mean, everybody just sweating. There was outage, like the lights turn off in the middle of the competition, power outage in a tropical paradise. What are the odds? So then 80 rolls around, and I guess Butch is a favorite going to the Nationals, and they were in the Philadelphia Spectrum. And I know the 76 Nationals were in Philly too, I believe. I remember walking around when I was younger, going to see that one. But excuse me. The whole family packs up, goes down. Butch competes and he wins. I forget his lifts exactly. Probably about a 47.5 snatch. And he probably clean and jerked about 185, maybe a little bit more. Just normal progression. Really, excuse me. Jesus, sorry about that. Leave it in. Play some. So he won that national, made the Olympic team. Now, the thing about that whole boycott, I think at that point we knew it was coming. I think it was already announced. We talked about it a little bit yesterday.
I think in April and
all right.
Nationals and trials were June, maybe.
Yeah, so it was after. So we knew, but there was still the hope that the U.S. team would go. But we knew there was a boycott, so it was bittersweet. He won. He's an Olympian. But we knew that, there was something rotten there, that he was going to be able to compete. There was hope that he could still go and compete. Some athletes tried to sue and go. I mean, if they tried to go under, a United flag, the U.S. State Department stepped in, from what I heard. They threatened the big USOC's biggest sponsor, Coca-Cola, I heard was threatened with fines and take away some tax breaks they had, all this different stuff that the government pulled to not let athletes go. Then plus they wouldn't give them visas to go to Russia and all. So that was, I think, the end. I mean, I think I heard some of them. Some athletes were going to try to go somewhere through Europe, but basically, they were done. They weren't going to be allowed out of the country at that point in time. They were not letting any U.S. athletes go to compete, no matter what happened. So I mean, that was that. And then and some people are very bitter, like Giordano. I mean, everybody's bitter about it. I mean, to this day, there's certain things that are mentioned around G, don't mention around Butch, especially Butch really, said he'll celebrate when something happens to Jimmy Carter. And, I look back and it was such a shame because, like, I guess it was a protest for Russia being in Afghanistan. And then, it worked so well, the boycott, that 10 years later, Russia got out of Afghanistan. Okay, good. The next thing I know, what is it, in the 90s now? How long ago that U.S. invades Afghanistan? So what it's like, so then they got another trip. They went to China to compete. I know Bobby G was done. He was so upset with the whole thing, but that's another story. Butch went, and he represented the USA, competed internationally. They went to China, competed big. He took like top 3. He actually competed against the one guy who's like the president of the U.S., the vice president of IWF now. He's the president of China. So Butch was buddies with him. Both 90-kilo lifters competed. They had a great time in China. I mean, he saw the world. They went, the wall. So they really tried to make up to the athletes who were not going to. I mean, this is weightlifting. They had an alternate Olympics, I guess it was, in 1980. The people who didn't go to Russia, China hosted it. He had a great time. He competed well there. I'm sure he medaled there. He always said that he would have took like 5th at the Olympics. Looking at the results from the Olympics, of what he was doing at the time, he was, doing not 60 snatch, probably 150, 70 he done at that point, and probably 192 clean and jerk. So it would have been a solid 5th, he felt. Also because back then it was USSR, so you only had like 290 kilos guys maybe to compete with. So that would have been, first and third, and it was a lot easier than having 8 different republics that are there now. But regardless, he was up and coming. He was in his prime then. He was really getting better. He was doing big lifts in the gym still in 80. I mean, he didn't quit. He kept going, even after the fact that he got to the Olympics. He got ready for China. And then they went, I think it was during the same trip, they got this alternate, they went to the alternate Olympics, then they went to Australia and New Zealand. And I think, oh no, that was a year later actually, I'm sorry, 81 he went. And that was another trip. But he was still competing. He was still going home and competing, and he was set to make the 84 Olympics. He was he was, made the one, didn't get to compete, and he really always wanted, I believe he wanted to march in and do it. And this is something my family supported him wholly with. And I remember, I remember my father would have done anything, my parents would have supported him. If he could have went to Moscow somehow, we would have got the money to get him there. If they could have let him go, he was gone. And then unfortunately, things happened. He trained, so he was so focused on training or leading into it, his wife wound up divorcing him and went with another fellow from the same gym. Leave it at that. But it's all good. I mean, it was, Butch is a hard person to live with. He's so focused on Butch that I've shared space with him a few times. And it's tough, though. So, and in fact, in 1980, at the same time, he stayed on the East Coast around that time. And I was out in his apartment in Berkeley with a friend of mine, and we spent the summer, we were there for 5 weeks, living, I had his car. Butch was on the East Coast. He just hung out. I think he must have took off from lifting at that point once the Olympics were passed. And it was I guess I went out in July, and I don't know if he stayed after, he probably went home after Philly, then after the Nationals came back, and then his training. So, but he did stick training. I remember that because he did travel. He went to China, did well, and he was really in better shape the next year. He kept making PRs and training hard. And then they went to, like I said, there was another trip. They went to New Zealand. They used to do a lot of U.S. versus Finland, U.S. versus other countries. Or they'd go train, the Russians used to come here and we'd have the Americans versus Europe. That's what happened in 75 before we had the Worlds in Gettysburg, where they had big teams, different teams, and we competed. And people would come and watch it. And then they had the record makers, which were around. And then Butchie lifted too. What year was that when Cameron did his 227? Well, anyway, he lifted, again, competed then, made his PR total. I think they did 50 and 190 in the meet. It was U.S. versus Canada. And they had a meet probably in Gettysburg in a high school, whatever, somewhere in Pennsylvania. That's where York Barbell was. So things were still happening down that way. And so he was competing. He made PRs. And then I believe that summer they went over to Australia, New Zealand, our summer. And then I guess he competed. He loved Australia, I remember. And then he went to New Zealand, I think it was, and he dislocated his shoulder at a jerk. And that basically was it. He tore some rotator cuffs. They didn't have the repairs they do now. And then I guess, he rehabbed it somewhat himself by lifting. I remember 81 Nationals he lost. But I remember watching him. It was in San Francisco. He attempted a 192.5 clean, I think, and his knee sort of came in and he tore it up a little bit. And he didn't win. I don't even think he placed. He might have placed top 3, but I think maybe Kevin went to beat him then. I forget who won that year. Maybe it was Michael Cohen. They were coming up in the 90 kilos. They did more than he had. His best total was 340. They wound up doing 350, a little bit more. He was headed towards that. So then, the 81 National, I know hurt his knee. Still went on a trip to, whatever it is, the Pacific there, and dislocated his shoulder. So that was it for a while. He competed in Seekonk. 83 was a great Nationals for a lot of reasons. A lot of American records were set. Some of the best lifting you've ever seen. Jeff Michaels and Kurt White. They were on fire. These were younger guys. Kurt White I competed with when we went to Charleston, Illinois in 76 for the Junior Olympics. That's because Kurt White's coach, Marty Schnorf, was there and they ran the Junior Olympics. And it was 500 young kids competing on 2 platforms. So, Butch lifted in Seekonk. He was back down to 82.5, ripped. He looked best shape of his life. Everything looked good, except for his shoulder was blown out. So he snatched 125, and then I don't know what he made in the jerk, maybe 77.5. Went up to 187 to medal, and then he would clean okay and jerk it, and just the shoulder would just be because the rotator cuff, there was no support there. So that was it. He trained through the Olympics. He still had the goal of, I'm not giving up. This is my dream. I'm going to walk in, opening ceremonies. And then when the shoulder blown out, that was basically it too. He's still, sorry. I was waiting for that to happen. The family's we're bitter about it. But, how much personally you want me to get about this? I could.
It's up to you.
I don't know what he said about it. He never moved on from it. He'll blame that the Olympic boycott ruined his life, but it's bullshit. You know, Miriam, no, it wasn't the wife, was he, you know, fully dedicated himself and didn't get past it. Other people went on to become lawyers, judges. A lot of people moved on. Some of the guys who are on the team are not with us anymore. Other people moved on and did stuff. Butch stayed very involved in weightlifting, coaching, being an official. He's on the board of directors. The 84 Olympics, he couldn't compete, but he worked it. It was in Los Angeles, so he worked it. He was a mascot escort, or he was a mascot. Like Sam the Eagle was the mascot, so he was involved with that. And he was involved with accreditation. He helped with weightlifting. He loaded at the competition. He was in training hall. We went out in 84. I was at the Olympics. We lived in, we had an apartment. We had a house, actually. This family rented a house in right outside Santa Monica in East LA. Not East LA, it was West LA. West? Whichever one. It was right outside Santa Monica. You walked down the street in Santa Monica. A little shadier address. But it was, you crossed the street, it was nice. Got on the bus. I was at the beach every day, then at the Olympic lift, watching the lifting. I was there every day. I loved it. Went to every sport at the 84 Olympics. It was like Disneyland. You know, it really was a hell of a place, Los Angeles. Unfortunately, Butch was done. He couldn't lift the big weights. His shoulder wasn't there. But like I said, it took everything out of him. I mean, he went out to Berkeley to get his degree in, I guess, exercise science. He went out there to study with certain people and to train with Jim Schmitz. So he gave up the dream. You know, he didn't finish school at that point because he was training for the Olympics or, you know, do my dissertation or whatever he had to do. And then the Olympics went out on everything, on family, his wife, everything. He just trained wholeheartedly for it, made the team, and then he moved past it. I mean, who do you blame? You know, he couldn't get past it. He still has it. He's still involved, still loves the sport, still knows a lot of stuff, no matter what on physically and everything, but he still, you know, hangs in there, still loves the sport, and he's helped other people become Olympians. He became like, worked with Jim Schmitz, with a lot of people, everybody else. I think the Sports Palace won like 10 nationals in a row, team champions. And he was very, you know, him and Jim are very close for years. Till recently. But anyway, I don't know what's going on. There's a little feud there. Something I don't know. They don't, none of my business yet, even though. So anyway, he never moved past it. And, you know, we've just talked about it, I guess, in the past. And it's like, you know, ruined my life. I said, fuck you. You know, how come everybody else moved on, but you know. Go finish your degree. Go do that. You can do anything. And then, you know, he still has, you know, I don't know. He still got involved with the Olympics. That was my point. 84, he went and helped out. 92, he went down to Florida and helped the Olympic send-off. He was on the, since he's an Olympian, he has a lot, you know, he was on the athletes board for as long as he could do that. You're allowed to, after being an athlete, the Athletes Advisory Commission. I think he was involved with that one way or the other. So he used to go like to the Olympic Committee meetings and stuff. Did some of that stuff. So he always was very involved. But that one thing, you know, that 1980 fucking boycott, it was just, man, what it took away, what it did to him. I'm also, like we said, Giordano, I grew up, I know him, now I know him probably 40 years, but, you know, he lived through that too, man. He disappeared for a few years as far as I remember. You know, he did. He just packed it all, put his shoes away, got rid of his stuff, and he was done with the sport. Came back a few years later. Then he came back, started coaching, and that's what brought him back again. But we don't talk about Michael Cohen too. He's another Olympian. You know, I forget where it was. Was it the trials? They got him all on stage. The Olympians who were there. Every 88 Olympics, the trials I was there, and they brought out the 80 team too. They announce them every time. They show them. People don't know. People don't know that. They look at Butch and he's very shy. You know, has communication little issues now, more than before. But you know, people don't realize that he's an Olympian. Same thing happened to G. When we were at the Americans, he was talking to his wife, minding the business, commenting on certain quality of lifters. Somebody got in his face, started mouthing off to him, saying, you know, just not knowing where he's coming from, not hearing the whole conversation, butting in when they don't belong. But I was like, gee, do they know who you are? Like, you know, you're not just some guy who's a spectator watching the sport who may have a kid or you know, somebody you know who's lifting. He bled for this sport, man. Bobby gave up everything around the 80 Olympic team. He was one of the first resident athletes in Colorado Springs. You know, he was living out there. He put his life on hold to do nothing but train and lift and go to Russia and medal. And they pulled that away from him. Jerry Hannon was another guy who was there. I think Guy Carlton was also in Colorado. Harvey was the coach. They did nothing. They were the first resident athletes for weightlifting. I don't even know about other sports. Butch stayed in San Francisco with his coach. He had his whole thing there. So, and that was it. And then he worked different odd jobs, I guess, after that, but good.
Did you, then or now, did you agree or disagree with the boycott or have a firm stance?
You know, No, I don't agree with it. I believe in the idea that the Olympics should be separated from politics, even though to this day it isn't. I don't agree with that the Russians didn't come. I went to the '84 Olympics. Still was beautiful. I saw a lot of athletes. The Romanians came. I saw Nico Vlad win his gold medal, and the Chinese was the first Olympics they were allowed at. So I think they won the smaller classes. It was impressive. No, because one, I'm not too political. But shit, man. Like I said, it's funny because I don't think the boycott did anything. And I look back, I get to another point that I mentioned to you the other day. I think we're talking about this. I was in college in the early 90s to become a physical therapist assistant. And one of the things I took was an oral communications class. So you had to do an argumentative speech. My thing was why Jimmy Carter sucked as president. So I went back looking through like Newsweek to try to get some background on where the country was at the time. I was like, this wasn't the country I lived in. There's all this stuff about these most, it was the Cold War, I guess. They had this many, all over Newsweek. Everything was like, if you read that and that's all you went back in a time capsule and saw, you would thought that the bombs were ready to fly and we were going to get bombed out and stuff. Meanwhile, I had a friend who graduated high school, his brother with me, and he was in the Air Force sitting in Florida in some room. They said every one of the missiles they have, he goes, Nick, you don't have a thing to worry about. No missile's going to make it. And I believed him, whether it was true or not. He was like, we got there. It's so covered. He goes, it's just. So I look back to do this speech. And I meant to pull it out to try to dig up my notes, but maybe later. But I saw that. I said, man, I don't remember this much tension again. Because I loved Russians. I had nothing against the Russians. I loved weightlifting. And the best Russian lifters in the world were Russians or the East Germans. I didn't care what country. I never felt like America has to be the greatest weightlifters. Screw everything. I wanted to see the best. I loved David Regan and Vardanyan and Alexeyev and on. All the great Rushari and all these great Russian lifters. I can't even say their names. The guys we didn't even get to see. And then everyone, these Germans and Bonker, but these big super heavyweights I grew up watching. And the Bulgarians, So I was never go USA and, Russia. To me, Russians were great weightlifters. They're great athletes. Even later on in this country, I met Russians that, oh, you're weightlifting. They'd be like, they're paranoid, a lot of them. And now it's probably better. 20 years ago, the Russians came in, they were, still living under, I guess, what they lived under, the regime. And, they didn't trust anyone. But you start talking weightlifting sports and like, you see, I light up about it. This was beautiful weightlifting. I grew up, I wasn't hated in Russians and what went on in Afghanistan, I'm like, I didn't know. But regardless, I know that they got out 10 years later. So I was like, fuck, what good did it do? Because to me, personally, it ruined dreams. I'm not going to say it ruined my brother's life, but it ruined his Olympic dream. To walk into the Olympics, to march in with the team, to compete, do your best, and then to, celebrate afterwards and be part of that. I saw what he got when he was at the Pan Am Games, which are, the year before the Olympics. It's the games. It isn't just the championships he went. He went to the games. It was all sports, opening ceremonies. So I saw what that was like. Another thing, too, when I was at the same time in school, I did my first affiliation as a therapist. I did my internship. The fellow who was working with me, he was Afghanistan. And he showed me pictures of him in the mountains with this rocket. He was a medic. So he was a medic. I don't know what that is, but he was a medic. And he's sitting there and he had a picture with, rocket launch and shit. And then he had another picture like the Russian tanks down and they're up in the hills and all. It's like, wow, you actually lived this and all. Whatever, they came in, whatever. He had to be in the army. He was a medic. He got drafted. He had to go sit in the mountains somewhere and treat people. I don't think he saw any fighting or whatnot. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't necessarily believe anything our press tells us anyway about what's going on. But not that I'm paranoid or anything. What else was I had another point to make. So, so do I think it was effective? No. And then, like I said, how many years later, Russia gets out, boom, 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 things change, new regiments come in there, whatever happens, we invade Afghanistan. I said, well, aren't these the people that we took a stand against Russia against? And, I don't know. I really don't know what it was about, really. Oil, I guess? I don't know. Other people would know better than me. I was just living, the dream. We're so proud. He's an Olympian. He wears his ring to this day. As far as I know, if it still fits, he wears it. Butch is, proud. I'm proud that he is an Olympian. But like I said, it didn't ruin people's. It ruined some people's. I'm sure some people didn't, worse off than Butch after it. But it shattered his fucking dream. But he still had that dream, though. So that was Thinking back, I don't ever think about this today talking to you because I know he kept training. He was all about making 84, I believe, till he ran into that. He went to, overseas. He lifted in Hawaii, too, against some great lifters like, was it Barski? I think Laszlo Barzi, I think his name was. He was a Hungarian lifter, big guy. Butch took the guy, 170, 210. Butch, he's doing, 50 and 90. But the guy was great. Or he might have beat him in Hawaii. Guy was out of shape on vacation. So when they went overseas, they lifted in Hawaii after China. They gave him a bunch of meets, and he did make a bunch of Americans. Never competed in the Worlds. I'm not sure what happened with that. Why he didn't make a world team. Well, 80 was Olympics. They didn't have a world team. 79, I don't think he made that world team. I know he didn't make it. That was in Moscow. I don't know how big of a team we sent. I think there was still a lot of guys left over from the 70s. I know, I can remember back some of the guys competing like Cameron. I think we sent like 5 guys over. It was still USA Weightlift. There was still a lot of Hoffman control, I believe, where, your York boy, he picked the money up. He picked his team. It was still controlled by Turpak and them back then, I believe. So, there's a lot of stories about that, but
All right.
is that good?
That's great, Nicky.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
All over the place. Good luck editing. You want me to give you directions to Hoboken or Bayonne? I don't know. I feel bad talking about that. I think it's effective in front of a military man. No, you know what I'm saying?
What are you doing? What is going on here? What's going on?
Platform. Oh, sorry. Fuck, I forgot. Did I fuck it up when I hit it? Oh, no, it was